Hello, everyone. I am the storyteller, and welcome to The Haunting Night. I know many of you listen to these stories to relax or fall asleep, so before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Before you drift off, let's begin. And let me know in the comments, where are you listening from?
He bought the house without ever stepping inside. It was a deal too good to pass up. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, Victorian architecture, original woodwork, all sitting on a hill that overlooked the sleepy town of Millbridge. The listing said motivated seller, and the price was less than half its value. Anthony didn't care why. All he knew was that he needed a fresh start. Divorce, job loss, the death of his sister, all within 8 months. When he saw the house online, something about it felt waiting. He packed his car, left the city behind, and drove through the fog to his new beginning. The house was grand but weary. The paint was peeling, and the gables looked like old bones under the slate-gray sky. As he stepped onto the porch, the boards groaned beneath his boots, a sound too close to a sigh. The key worked, but the door resisted, only opening after a hard shove, like something inside didn't want him there. Dust choked the air. The front room was filled with old furniture, all covered in yellowing sheets. An antique mirror near the stairs was cracked down the middle, like it had been struck by something sharp. Anthony walked through, opening windows, letting the autumn air chase the stillness out. By evening, he had unpacked enough to feel settled. A mattress on the floor, a camp chair, a lamp. No internet yet, no TV. Just the wind through the trees and the creak of the house settling. He poured himself a glass of wine and stood at the upstairs window, watching fog roll over Millbridge like a living thing. That's when he noticed the light across the hallway. A warm golden glow spilled out from under a closed door, the guest room, a room he hadn't entered yet. His breath caught. He hadn't turned on any other lights. He opened the door slowly. Nothing. No bulb, no lamp. Just empty space, cold and dark. He backed out, heart thudding, and told himself it was a trick of the old wiring. These kinds of houses were full of weird quirks. Drafts, reflections, memories. But that night, the dreams began. They weren't his dreams. He saw a woman in an old-fashioned dress standing at the top of the staircase, looking down. Her face was pale, features blurred like a painting left in the rain. In her hands, she held a broken mirror. She whispered something, but the words were lost in the sound of glass shattering. Anthony woke up on the floor, drenched in sweat, shards of glass around him from the hallway mirror he must have knocked over in his sleep. Except he hadn't touched that mirror. He cleaned it up and promised himself he'd be out of the house more. Go to town, meet people, take walks. Anything but sit and rot in someone else's memories. But the dreams persisted, and they grew worse. One night, he saw a man locked in the basement, pounding on the door, his mouth sewn shut with black thread. Another, a child hiding under the dining table, sobbing, clutching a burnt teddy bear as something crawled on the ceiling, clicking and whispering. Every time he woke, the air felt heavier. The shadows longer. He started finding things he didn't own. A woman's hairbrush in the bathroom. Children's shoes by the back door. A pocket watch on the nightstand, ticking backward. He called the real estate agent. No answer. He checked the listing online. It was gone. Worse, the house didn't exist on any map anymore. Frantic, Anthony went into town to ask around. The people of Millbridge were polite, but distant. When he mentioned the address, most looked confused. A few just shook their heads and walked away. One old man at the diner, however, leaned close. "You should leave," he said. "That house doesn't want company. Never has." "Do you know what happened there?" Anthony asked. The old man hesitated. "Not all at once. Over time, people go in and pieces of them stay. Sometimes whole families disappear. Other times just parts. That place remembers. It collects." Anthony drove back in silence. The house was waiting. Inside, the air was ice cold, though no windows were open. The lights wouldn't turn on. The shadows in the hall had grown, so deep they looked like holes in the world. He planned to pack and leave the next morning. Whatever money he lost didn't matter anymore. Survival did, but the house had other plans. That night, he heard music, an old lullaby coming from the guest room. It drifted down the hall like smoke. Against his will, his feet moved. He opened the door. The woman from his dream stood there, humming softly. In the corner of the room was a crib. Inside it, something moved. Anthony couldn't look away. The woman turned to him, her mouth a jagged line of teeth, eyes hollow, voice now echoing in two tones, one high and one impossibly low. "You took his room," she hissed. The floor gave way beneath Anthony. He fell, not into the basement, but into the walls. He landed in darkness, trapped. Around him were others, dozens, maybe hundreds, eyes watching, voices whispering. All of them had lived in the house at some point. Now they were the house, and the house was hungry. In town, the property went quiet. The house sat still. A month later, a new listing appeared online. Beautiful Victorian, motivated seller, needs some love. Attached was a single photo. In one of the windows, barely visible, was a pale face with wide, screaming eyes. But if you looked closer, you'd swear the house was smiling. It was supposed to be a simple road trip. 5 friends driving cross-country from New Mexico to Oregon. Just them, the open road, and the wild feeling of freedom before adult life truly began. They'd taken every precaution. Spare tires, plenty of snacks, paper maps in case GPS failed. But there's one thing you can't plan for, the place between the places. The road stretched for hours, long and empty. At some point after crossing into northern Nevada, the signal dropped completely. No internet, no radio, not even static. Just silence. The sun was beginning to set, and the desert landscape started to change. Fewer cacti, more dry trees that looked too twisted to be natural. Ellie was the first to notice the sign. "Did anyone see that?" she asked, pointing out the window. There was an old wooden sign on the side of the road. Hand-painted letters, barely legible in the fading light. "Welcome to Duskwell. Population? What kind of town doesn't know its population?" Jared joked, squinting at it in the rearview mirror. "I say we keep driving," muttered Maria from the back seat. "Something about this place feels off." But as they rounded a bend in the road, the car sputtered. Then it died completely. Jared pulled over, cursing under his breath, and tried the ignition again. Nothing. The group exchanged worried glances. The sun dipped lower, casting an eerie orange light over the horizon. "All right," Jared said, grabbing a flashlight. "Let's check the engine. Maybe it's just overheated." They popped the hood. Everything looked fine. No smoke, no strange smells. Just off. And then the town appeared. None of them saw it emerge. One moment it was empty desert. The next, Duskwell was there. Dim streetlights flickered to life in the distance. Small wooden houses, all dark. A gas station. A diner. A church with its bell tower leaning at a precarious angle. No people, no movement. It looked like a movie set that had been abandoned years ago. Against their better judgment, the group decided to walk toward it. They needed help. A phone, a mechanic, anything. As they approached the diner, Ellie squinted through the window. "There's someone in there," she whispered. Inside, a man sat in a booth, perfectly still. His hands were folded. His eyes were wide open. His face was pale and waxy, like an old mannequin. On the table in front of him was a full plate of food. Pancakes, eggs, bacon. Untouched. No steam. Mold creeping over the edges. Then the lights flickered. The man turned his head, very slowly, to look at them. Screaming, they ran. Back out onto the street. But now the road was gone. Where the desert had stretched behind them, now there were only more buildings, narrow alleys, streets that bent into impossible loops. It was as if Duskwell was expanding, reshaping itself to trap them inside. "Let's find the church," Maria gasped. "Maybe they have a phone, or a bell tower we can climb for a signal." The group sprinted toward the crooked church. As they neared, a figure stepped out from the shadows near the front door. A little girl. She was barefoot, wearing a torn white dress. Her hair was matted with dirt and something darker. "Are you lost too?" she asked softly. "Yes," Ellie said, trembling. The girl didn't blink. "You can't leave. Once you see Duskwell, it remembers you." Jared stepped forward. "We don't want to be here. We just broke down." "The town doesn't care," the girl said, her voice suddenly deeper, more adult. "It collects the forgotten, and now you're part of it." She turned and walked into the church. The group hesitated, then followed her inside. The pews were empty. The altar rotted. Candles flickered with black flames. At the far end of the room, behind the pulpit, was a massive mural, painted in reds and browns and black. It depicted a faceless town swallowing people whole. Their bodies twisted, eyes gouged, smiles painted on like puppets. And in the bottom corner of the mural was a fresh addition. 5 new faces, hastily painted, almost unfinished, but recognizable. Them. "I'm done," whispered Isaac, backing away. "We have to leave, now." They turned to flee, but the door was gone. Just a wall where it once was. Maria screamed. Ellie dropped to her knees. Jared pounded on the wood until his fists bled. Then they heard the music. Old-time piano music. Coming from the diner. Faint. Inviting. They were drawn back through the town, one by one, as if in a trance. The buildings watched. The windows blinked. Every street corner brought them back to the same place. The diner. Now it was full. Booths filled with unmoving people, all pale, wide-eyed, stuck in endless moments before death. A seat was open at each booth. 5 seats. One for each of them. And without understanding why or how, they each sat down. The food appeared. The music grew louder. And they forgot. Forgot the road trip. Forgot who they were. Forgot they had ever existed outside of Duskwell. They smiled, the town whispered, and somewhere far away in a different part of the world, a traveler saw a strange sign by the road. Welcome to Duskwell, population. But this time, beneath the numbers, a new line was painted in blood. We're saving you a seat. The asylum had been closed for decades, a massive structure of crumbling bricks and shattered windows, hidden deep in the forest just outside of Ravenshire. No one dared go near it, not because of ghosts, but because of what really happened there. The town didn't speak of Hollow Pines Asylum. It was like the entire place had been scrubbed from memory, from history. Maps didn't mark its existence anymore. Even Google Earth blurred the satellite images around it. But 17-year-old Lucas had heard stories. His grandfather had worked there once as a night janitor, before he vanished without a trace. Lucas had never let it go. On a gray October evening with storm clouds crouching low and crows screeching in the trees, he set out toward the asylum with a flashlight, a camera, and a bag full of snacks and batteries. He wanted answers. Closure. Maybe even to find his grandfather's belongings. Or his body. The trees grew denser as he moved forward, branches clawing at his jacket, roots snaking like veins underfoot. After an hour of walking, the forest suddenly opened up. And there it stood. Hollow Pines. The building towered over the clearing, sagging but still standing. Ivy crawled up the sides like veins. The main doors were slightly ajar, swaying in the wind. Lucas stepped inside. The air was heavy, stagnant, laced with mildew and something metallic. Dried blood? The walls were peeling, paint curling like dead skin. Graffiti marked nearly every surface, most of it unreadable, except for one phrase, scrawled in jagged black ink again and again. They never left. Lucas turned on his flashlight and walked the halls. He passed old patient rooms, their rusted bed frames bent and broken, mattresses rotted through. In some, names were still carved into the doors. Room 14, G. Tompkins. Room 27, A. Vale. Room 33, M. Elbridge. Every so often, he'd hear something. A creak, a dragging sound, whispering that seemed to come from the vents. But when he stopped, it stopped. On the 3rd floor, Lucas found a sealed room at the end of a hall. The door was locked, but not tightly. The hinges were so rusted they came apart with a single tug. Inside was an office, a desk, a chair, a shattered lamp, and an old filing cabinet. He pulled it open, coughing as a puff of dust rose into the air. The first file he found was dated 1971, the year his grandfather disappeared. The patient name stopped him cold. Franklin Rayner, his grandfather. Lucas read the document in silence, his hands trembling. It wasn't a janitor's record. It was a patient file. His grandfather had been committed to the asylum, not employed by it. Diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, he had reportedly been ranting about faces in the walls and voices that told him to eat his own hands. There were notes from doctors, transcripts of interviews, and finally, a discharge form. Except it wasn't signed. No one had ever let him out. As Lucas flipped through the rest of the cabinet, something thudded in the hallway outside. He froze. His flashlight flickered. Then another thud. Closer this time. Lucas stepped out of the office and turned toward the sound, and saw something standing at the end of the corridor. It was tall, gaunt, wearing the tattered remains of a patient's gown. Its face was wrapped in gauze, except for its mouth, which was enormous, jagged with teeth like nails, stretching impossibly wide. It whispered something he couldn't hear, but felt in his bones. Lucas ran. He bolted down the stairs, tripping, scraping his knee on broken tiles. The creature followed, its long limbs scraping the walls as it moved, the whisper getting louder. He ducked into a side corridor and slammed a door shut behind him. He was in a rec room. Old games and broken chairs scattered the floor. In the far corner, a single television turned on, static buzzing on the screen, and in the static, a face. His grandfather's face. Lucas crept closer. The face in the screen was speaking, but no sound came through. Then, in one sudden burst, a voice ripped through the room like a scream. "Leave, now!" The door behind him exploded inward. The creature was back. But this time, it spoke. In a voice that sounded like every whisper he'd ever heard layered on top of one another, it said, "He belongs here. And now, so do you." It lunged. Lucas didn't scream. He couldn't. The air was sucked from the room as the creature engulfed him. Darkness. Silence. Then, a heartbeat. Lucas woke up on a metal bed in a padded cell. His flashlight was gone, so was his camera. He tried to move, but his wrists were restrained. A voice crackled from a speaker in the corner. "Patient 74 is stable. Proceeding with observation." Lucas screamed, pounded his head against the wall, but no one came. In the hallway, a new name was being carved into the door. Room 74. Outside the asylum, the wind blew, and the doors of Hollow Pines slowly closed again, waiting for the next visitor. The town of Raven Hollow had only one real attraction, a twisted little antique shop called the Hollow Eye. Tucked between a boarded-up barber shop and an abandoned bakery, the store had no open hours, no clerk behind the counter, and no working lights inside. Yet somehow, everyone in town knew someone who had found something just right in there. Most people didn't talk about what they bought. Maxine was a 22-year-old university dropout who'd recently returned to Raven Hollow after her mother's sudden death. Grief had dulled her world into shades of gray, and the loneliness clawed at her skin like an itch she couldn't scratch. One night, while wandering the nearly silent streets, she found herself outside the Hollow Eye. A faint red glow pulsed behind its grimy windows. The door creaked open on its own. She stepped inside. It smelled of dust and rusted iron. The shelves were crowded with strange objects. Broken porcelain dolls with black eyes, ancient clocks with no hands, tarnished jewelry crusted in something dark. And then there was the mirror, roughly 5 feet tall, framed in rotting wood and covered in fingerprints. But something about it shimmered. Not with light, but with presence. Maxine felt something tug behind her eyes as she approached it. The surface was reflective, but wrong. Her image blinked a moment later than she did, smiled without her. A small note was pinned to the top of the frame. "See what you've lost." Maxine stared, and in the mirror, the reflection of her mother appeared behind her, crying. Mouth opening and closing like she was trying to speak, but no sound came out. Maxine gasped and turned. Nothing. Empty space. But when she looked back into the mirror, her mother was still there. Desperate, heart thudding, she grabbed the mirror and rushed home. For the next few days, Maxine became obsessed. The mirror never failed to show her mother's reflection. Not a ghost, but something deeper. Her mom would do things. Hold up fingers, nod, or shake her head in response to Maxine's questions, point to things in the room she couldn't see, and each day her reflection became more solid, more real. Maxine stopped leaving the house. She talked to the mirror like she used to talk to her mom. Told her stories. Cooked meals while keeping her in view. Played her favorite songs. It felt like healing. Until her mother's reflection started pointing to the hallway. At first, Maxine thought it meant something symbolic. But the pointing grew more intense, more urgent. Her mother began to look scared. One night, the reflection pressed its hands flat to the inside of the glass, mouthing something again and again. "Don't open it." Then the knocking began. It came from the hallway, always around 3:03 a.m., soft at first, then louder, a slow, deliberate rhythm, like someone knocking with their head instead of their fist. Thud, thud, thud. Maxine locked her bedroom door, covered the mirror with a sheet, slept with headphones on. But the knocking came back. And worse, the reflection of her mother had changed. Her eyes were sunken now, her hands trembling, and sometimes another shape flickered behind her. A dark, tall figure, faceless, with arms far too long. When Maxine cried and asked what to do, her mother pointed to the mirror's frame, then mimed breaking it. Maxine didn't want to. She needed the mirror. It was all she had left. But something was growing behind the glass. A shadow that shifted closer each night. One morning, the reflection of her mother was gone entirely. Only the tall figure remained, standing where she used to be. Maxine grabbed a hammer. She swung it hard, cracking the glass. A shriek filled the air, not from the mirror, but from inside her walls. The air grew cold. The hammer flew from her hand by some unseen force, embedding itself in the wooden floor. The mirror mended itself before her eyes. The next night, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Just one message. You opened it. Maxine didn't sleep. She sat in her living room with every light on, surrounded by salt lines and open windows. Then, 3:03 a.m. The knocking again. Only this time, it wasn't from the hallway. It came from inside the mirror. She turned toward it, and her mother's face was back. Bloodied, bruised, screaming silently, clawing at the glass, her eyes wide with terror. Then came the voice, a deep, gravelly whisper that seemed to echo from inside Maxine's skull. Suddenly, the reflection of Maxine appeared next to her mother, but this version of her was wrong, pale, eyes completely black, grinning. It raised its hand and tapped the inside of the mirror twice. Maxine backed away. The lights in her apartment went out. The last thing she saw before she passed out was her own reflection, waving goodbye. When she woke, it was morning. Everything looked normal, too normal, like it had been reset. But something felt wrong. When she looked into the mirror, her reflection didn't wave back, didn't blink at the same time, didn't move when she moved. And when she turned around, behind her, in the real room, the mirror image smiled, and stayed smiling. Forever. That night, a new item appeared on the shelf of the hollow eye. A cracked mirror, with "Do not trust her," and behind the glass, if you stare long enough, you might still see Maxine. Still screaming. He always took the same route home from his night shifts. Quiet, dimly lit streets that passed by an old textile factory, long shut down by the city. It stood like a rusted skeleton from another era. Windows broken, bricks weathered by time, its towering chimney like a finger pointing to nowhere. Jared had walked past it for 3 years without incident. He didn't believe in ghost stories or small-town legends. The rumors about the factory being cursed? He chalked it up to teenage boredom and small-town exaggeration. But something changed the night of November 28th. It was colder than usual. His breath curled out in long clouds, and the street lamps flickered as if struggling to stay alive. As he passed the factory gate, a soft creak echoed through the air. He paused. One of the huge metal doors was slightly ajar, just enough to notice the black void inside. He would have kept walking if not for the whisper. Not words. Just a sound. Low, almost like humming. It chilled him, but something about it pulled him in. Against every reasonable instinct, Jared pushed the gate open and stepped inside. The stench hit him first. Rot, oil, and mold. The kind that clung to your clothes, your skin. He lifted his phone for light, the beam shaking slightly in his hand. The place was a maze of collapsed beams, rusted sewing machines, and shattered glass. Shadows played tricks in every corner. Then the humming grew louder. He followed it through the debris to the far end of the warehouse, where an old elevator shaft yawned open, like a mouth. The humming came from below, deep, rhythmic, almost like someone was working a loom beneath the earth. A rope hung from the ceiling, frayed but sturdy enough. Jared, caught somewhere between curiosity and fear, grabbed it and started to descend the shaft. The further down he went, the colder it became. He finally landed in a narrow corridor, bricks slick with moisture, lined with rusted pipes. The humming had stopped, replaced by a different sound now. Soft breathing. Not his. Then he saw the first one. A woman, hunched in a corner, wearing what looked like a stained worker's uniform from the 1920s. Her eyes were sewn shut, black thread cutting deep into the skin. Her hands twitched in slow, jerky movements, as if mimicking some long-forgotten sewing pattern. She didn't react to the light, didn't speak, just rocked and sewed invisible thread through the air. He turned a corner and saw another, then another. A line of women, all with sewn eyes, faces pale as bone, moving in perfect unison. And then, humming again. But this time, it came from behind him. Jared spun, phone lights sweeping across the corridor until it landed on a tall figure. It was wearing the face of a man, but just barely. Skin too tight, lips sewn. A long needle dangled from his right hand. It pointed at Jared like an accusation. He ran. He didn't stop to look back. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly. The light flickered and died. He kept going in the dark until his hand slammed into the elevator rope. Scrambling, slipping, he pulled himself back up, nails breaking as he climbed. He burst out of the shaft and out of the factory, falling to the pavement, panting, the night sky spinning above him. He didn't tell anyone. Not the police, not his girlfriend, not even his therapist. But he stopped walking that way home, took a longer route every night, even if it meant getting home an hour later. Weeks passed, then one night Jared came home to find a box on his doorstep. No return label, just his name, written in uneven, jagged handwriting. Inside was a piece of fabric, hand-sewn, old, blood-stained. He dropped it, hands trembling. That night he barely slept. The dreams started soon after. He was back in the factory, only now he was one of them. Seated in a row, sewing endlessly with thread made of hair. The hum surrounded him like a lullaby. His mouth moved, though he didn't speak, and every night his fingers bled. He started waking up with scratches on his hands. One morning he found a long black thread stitched between his thumb and forefinger, like it had grown from inside. Doctors couldn't explain it. The fabric from the box had vanished. He moved out of town, burned his old clothes, blocked every memory of that place. But the dreams never stopped. Then came the news. A development company had purchased the factory. Plans were underway to tear it down and build luxury apartments. On the day of demolition, a camera crew was documenting the event. A photojournalist, curious about the history of the site, wandered into the rubble with a handheld camera. What he captured never aired on the news, but the raw footage was leaked anonymously online. It shows him walking through the ruins, narrating softly until his voice cuts off. He pans the camera left, showing a single wall still standing, streaked with blood. Dozens of small holes are visible in the brick, as if needles had pierced them over and over. Then the camera picks up movement. A woman steps into frame, eyes sewn shut. She turns to the camera and smiles. The journalist gasps. The camera shakes, falls. The last image, blurry and upside down, shows several more figures walking from the shadows, dragging long lines of black thread behind them. The audio ends with one word, whispered, almost lovingly. Jared. No one has seen the journalist since. And in the footage, if you pause at just the right frame, you can see one more figure in the back. A man, sitting, sewing, tears running from his sealed eyes, wearing Jared's work badge. The train only stopped at Deer Hollow once a day. A sleepy little town, tucked between thick woods and forgotten rail lines, its station hadn't seen much life in years. The old conductor, Mr. Harris, always joked that the platform had more ghosts than passengers. But on the 14th of November, something changed. The train arrived on schedule, 6:13 p.m., just as the sun dipped below the tree line, painting the horizon blood red. Only one person stepped off that evening. A girl, early 20s, pale, barefoot, and wearing a white hospital gown stained with something dark at the hem. Station Master Paul Reeves was the first to see her. He watched in confusion as she stepped onto the platform, her eyes distant, her arms bruised and scratched like she had run through thorns. He approached slowly. Miss, are you all right? Do you need help? She looked at him but didn't speak. Her mouth trembled like she wanted to say something. Then she turned and walked straight out of the station, into the trees behind it. Paul reported the incident, but there were no missing person reports matching her description. The hospital gown had no name tag, and the train's conductor insisted he didn't see her on board. No one got off, he said. I'm sure of it. By the next morning, word had spread through the town. Rumors ignited like dry leaves. Some said the girl was a ghost. Others swore they'd seen her wandering the forest that night, her white gown glowing in the dark like a lantern. That's when the disappearances began. 3 teenagers went missing first. They had dared each other to go searching for her in the woods. They never came back. Then came Mrs. Ellison, the librarian, last seen locking up just before dark. 2 more locals vanished over the following week, all near the station. Panic started to settle in. The police organized search parties. Drones were flown over the forest. But nothing was found. No bodies. No footprints. Only one thing kept turning up. Long, white threads of fabric caught on branches, and thin trails of dried blood leading nowhere. It wasn't until the night of the 21st that someone finally captured her on camera. A hunter's trail cam picked up footage deep in the woods. A girl walking barefoot, slowly, almost floating. Her eyes glowed in the infrared light, wide and blank. She turned to face the camera just before the video cut out. That hunter, a man named Jacob Miles, was found the next morning. His body was sitting upright against a tree, his rifle untouched beside him, his eyes open and mouth locked in a silent scream. There wasn't a mark on him. Except one, a handprint burned into the skin of his chest, shaped like a child's. That was the tipping point. The townspeople started to leave, one by one. Homes were boarded up, businesses shuttered. Even the local sheriff packed up and drove off without a word. But not Paul Reeves. He had worked the Deer Hollow station for 32 years, and something about the girl wouldn't let him go. He became obsessed. He printed her image from the trail cam, posted it around his office, kept a journal of every strange noise, every light flicker, every whisper he thought he heard on the platform at night. Then one morning, Paul disappeared too. His office was found in perfect order. Coffee still warm, his logbook open on the desk, and written in shaky handwriting across the final page was, "She's not lost. She's looking for someone. I think it's me." The station closed officially the next week. But the story doesn't end there. 6 months later, a group of urban explorers found their way to Deer Hollow. They were filming a series about haunted places. They had heard the legends. They wanted proof. They never uploaded the footage. But the SD card was recovered from one of their abandoned backpacks, found just inside the woods near the station. The footage starts off normal, laughs, banter, flashlights cutting through the trees. Then it shifts. Heavy breathing, screams, the sound of something dragging across the forest floor. A glimpse of white in the distance, followed by a sharp cut to black. But it's the final clip that unsettled authorities. The camera is lying on the ground, filming upward. The girl in white steps into frame. She leans down, close to the lens. Her mouth opens, and she whispers, "You've been here before." She smiles, a grotesque thing, too wide for her face, and behind her, just for a moment, other faces begin to emerge from the shadows. Faces of the missing, their mouths sewn shut, eyes pleading, trapped. But one face stands out among them all. Paul Reeves. His lips are torn open. His eyes locked in a stare of endless eternal horror. Then the camera cuts out. The SD card was sent to investigators, but they found nothing, just corrupted data. Except for one thing. When they played the audio backward, a voice whispered, "Next stop." And that night, somewhere far from Deer Hollow at a station 2 towns over, a train arrived late, at exactly 6:13 p.m. And a girl in a white gown stepped off, barefoot, blood at the hem, still looking. The old farmhouse had been abandoned for over 40 years. Its weather-beaten frame leaning slightly as though the wind might finally convince it to collapse. Locals in the nearby town of Fair Hollow avoided it, even during the day. Stories of screams in the night, flickering lights in windows with no power, and animals that refused to go near the property had earned it a dark reputation. Which is exactly why 19-year-old Daniel and his friends decided it would be the perfect place to film their horror vlog. They weren't amateurs. Their YouTube channel had just hit 100K subscribers, and they wanted something that would push them over the edge, something real. They didn't believe in ghosts, of course, just stories, legends, to exploit for clicks. They packed their cameras, night vision gear, EMF detectors they barely understood, and one old Ouija board for dramatic effect. There were 5 of them. Daniel, the ringleader, Jason, his cocky best friend, Emily, the skeptic, Leah, the quiet one who always sensed things before anyone else, and Max, the tech guy. They arrived just before sunset and set up camp in the overgrown front yard, filming intros and joking about haunted toilets and possessed chickens. When night fell, everything changed. The farmhouse was colder inside than it should have been. Every footstep echoed like it was being followed. As they explored, the flashlight beams danced across walls with peeling wallpaper and broken furniture. Something about the place felt off. Not just abandoned, watched. They started hearing things by the time they reached the 2nd floor. Soft thuds from the attic. A child's giggle echoing faintly from somewhere below. They chalked it up to creaky wood and wind until Leah stopped dead in the hallway. "Do you hear that?" She whispered. The others listened. Nothing. Then, tap, tap, like fingernails on glass. It was coming from the room at the end of the hall. The nursery. Daniel pushed the door open slowly, camera rolling. The room was mostly empty, save for a single wooden rocking horse in the corner. It began to rock on its own. Everyone froze. "Wires?" Jason muttered, but Max shook his head. "Not ours." Then Leah pointed to the window. On the glass from the inside were 5 small handprints. Fresh, wet, like they'd just been pressed there. "I'm done," Emily said. "This isn't funny anymore." But Daniel convinced them to do one last thing, use the Ouija board in the living room. "Just for the finale," he begged. "One scene." Reluctantly, they agreed. They set up the cameras in a half circle and placed their fingers on the planchette. Jason laughed nervously. "If there's a ghost here, tell us your name." The planchette moved. They all looked at each other. A-A-N. It spelled. Leah's face turned white. Nathan Martin. That was the name of the boy who went missing here in the 70s. They say his mom went crazy and killed him. Silence. Jason tried to break the tension. "Well, Nathan, if you're here, give us a sign." All the lights went out. The cameras died, and the front door slammed shut. They scrambled to their feet. Max pulled out his phone for light, but the screen stayed black. Emily grabbed her bag to leave, only to find it missing. Jason tried opening a window, nailed shut. Then they heard it, a slow rhythmic creaking from upstairs, rocking. The horse. It was moving again. Daniel ran up with the backup camera. He reached the nursery and swung the door open, empty, until he panned to the corner. The horse rocked and something sat on it, a figure, small, pale, eyes dark and hollow. The child slowly turned toward him. "You let her out," it whispered. Daniel screamed and bolted back downstairs. "What did you see?" Leah asked. "It wasn't Nathan," he stammered. "It was something else." Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen. They rushed in to find the cabinets all open, dishes shattered on the floor, and on the wall, smeared in something dark, was a single word, "Mother." The room went icy cold. "We need to leave, now," Leah hissed. But when they turned to the door, it was gone. Not just locked, gone. In its place was a wall. Then the crying began. Low, mournful, coming from the attic. They didn't want to go, but some force dragged their feet forward. One by one, they climbed the narrow stairs to the attic door. It opened before they could touch it. Inside was a single rocking chair, and in it, a woman. Her face was gaunt, skin sagging like melted wax. Her eyes were completely white. She rocked slowly, clutching something in her arms, a bundle wrapped in a baby blanket, stained brown with old blood. She looked up. "You let him out," she said. "He was sleeping. Now you'll sleep too." The door slammed shut behind them. The footage ends there. That video was uploaded to their channel 3 days later. It now has over 12 million views. Nobody knows who uploaded it. Nobody has seen any of the 5 friends since. Their cars were still parked at the edge of the woods. Their tents still pitched. But the farmhouse burned to the ground the next night. No trace of fire accelerants, no signs of forced entry. Just ash. And a single child's handprint burned into a piece of glass found in the rubble. The storm rolled in faster than expected, washing the lonely stretch of highway in a curtain of rain. Eric was already late for his overnight shift at the truck depot, and the downpour only made things worse. He squinted through the windshield, wipers thudding rhythmically as thunder rumbled like distant growls. That's when he saw her. A girl, soaked to the bone, standing on the side of the road. No umbrella. No jacket. Just a pale white dress that clung to her skin like a second layer. Her head was down, hair plastered to her face. She didn't wave, she didn't move, just stood there like she'd been waiting. Eric hit the brakes. Something about her felt off, but he rolled the window down slightly. "You need a ride?" She nodded slowly without looking up. Reluctantly, he unlocked the door. She climbed in without a word, water pooling on the seat beneath her. Her skin looked almost gray in the dashboard light. She stared straight ahead, lips barely parted. No seatbelt. No thanks. Just silence. "Where you headed?" he asked, forcing casual. She turned to him, eyes wide, unblinking. "Home." Eric frowned. "Where's that?" She pointed straight ahead. It felt like a movie, the kind where the hitchhiker isn't what she seems, but Eric shook the thought off. Maybe she'd been in an accident. Maybe she was in shock. Still, the temperature in the car seemed to drop 10 degrees the moment she entered. They drove in silence for 15 minutes before she spoke again. "Do you believe in ghosts?" Eric chuckled nervously. Not really? Should I?" She didn't respond. He glanced over. She was smiling, barely. It was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "My sister says you're supposed to stay on the road," she whispered. "That the woods are hungry." Eric blinked. "What?" But when he looked again, her seat was empty. The car swerved. He hit the brakes and slid to a stop in the middle of the highway. Rain hammered the roof like fists. His heart pounded as he reached over to touch the seat. Wet. She had been there. He looked in the rearview mirror. The road was empty. No figure. No headlights behind him. Just trees and rain. Eric sat for a long minute, trying to calm his nerves. He considered calling someone, but who would believe him? Eventually, he pulled back onto the road. 10 more miles past, he rounded a curve and saw her again. Same dress, same pale skin, same bowed head, standing under the blinking yellow sign of a closed gas station. He didn't stop this time. Instead, he floored the accelerator. But as he looked in the mirror, her face appeared in the back seat. "You didn't listen," she said softly. He screamed and nearly lost control. When he looked again, she was gone. The rest of the drive to the depot was a blur. Eric didn't remember parking. He didn't remember clocking in. He just sat in the break room, staring at his reflection in the vending machine glass. He didn't tell anyone. The next night, he avoided that stretch of highway, took the long way around. Still, halfway through the trip, his headlights flickered. Then the radio crackled to life. No music, just static, and then her voice. "She's hungry again." Eric slammed the radio off. It came back on by itself. "You'll feed her." The power in the truck died. Everything shut off. Headlights, dashboard, engine. He coasted to a stop. Fog rolled in from the woods. That's when he saw the others. Figures standing in the trees. Dozens of them. Men, women, children, soaking wet, unmoving. Faces gray, hollow-eyed, all staring at him. The girl stepped forward. "She's always hungry." Eric locked the doors, but the truck lights flickered back on, and she was standing in front of the hood. She tilted her head. "You brought her home." Suddenly the windows cracked. Not shattered, cracked, all at once. From the inside, the girl's mouth widened into a black, gaping grin. Eric blacked out. He woke up in the middle of the road, alone. The truck was gone. His phone was dead, not broken, drained, like something had fed on it. He walked until he found a gas station. The attendant looked startled when Eric stumbled in, soaked and shaking. "You all right, ma'am?" Eric nodded weakly. "What happened to your truck?" Eric froze. "What do you mean?" "There was a wreck last night, right where the highway curves near the old service station. Burned up bad. Driver was charred to bones. Said they found a girl's footprints around the wreck, barefoot." Eric's mouth went dry. "I didn't crash." The man blinked. "Buddy, your picture was on the news this morning. Said you died in that wreck." Eric slowly turned toward the store window. His reflection wasn't there. Only raindrops sliding down the glass. The Baxter family moved into the farmhouse on a cloudless summer morning. The realtor smiled a little too wide, hurried them through paperwork, and handed over the keys without making much eye contact. It was a steal for such a large property, secluded, spacious, and surrounded by dense woods. The place had charm, with its creaky floorboards and peeling wallpaper, a rustic feeling Julia and Mark found romantic. Their daughter Lila didn't share their excitement. "Someone's already here," she said, standing in the upstairs hallway the first night. "A boy. He watches from the attic." Mark laughed it off as childhood imagination. Lila was 5, and he figured she'd read too many ghost stories or picked up tales from cartoons. But later that night, as he and Julia lay in bed, they heard the soft dragging of footsteps across the ceiling, right above them, where the attic sat locked and unused. The next morning, Mark pulled down the old ladder and climbed into the attic. Dust coated every inch, and sunlight sliced through slats in the roof. Nothing seemed out of place, except one small detail. In the far corner, nestled in cobwebs, was a wooden rocking horse, worn and faded, rocking ever so slightly on its own. That night, Lila refused to sleep in her room. "He doesn't like my blanket," she whispered. "Says red makes him angry." Mark and Julia exchanged a glance. Lila's blanket was, indeed, bright red. Julia gently swapped it for a pale blue one and tucked her in. At 2:33 a.m., the smoke alarm went off. Julia bolted out of bed to find Lila's blanket smoldering in the living room fireplace, though no fire was lit. No one had been downstairs. They began to notice other strange things. Drawings appeared on the walls in crayon, dark stick figures with hollow eyes, always standing in the attic. Lila's toys rearranged themselves while she slept, lined up perfectly facing her bed. The dog refused to go upstairs and would bark violently toward the ceiling every evening at the same time. 3:14 a.m. One night, Julia heard giggling echo through the baby monitor, despite the fact Lila was sound asleep. When confronted, Lila was calm. He just wants to play. He says his name is Thomas. Mark began researching the property's history. What he found sent a chill down his spine. In 1947, a boy named Thomas Green had lived in the house. He was 8 when he disappeared without a trace. The parents, accused of neglect, eventually vanished themselves. The house was sold and resold over the decades, usually within a year. Every owner left citing bad feelings or financial ruin. Some said the attic was cursed. They decided to burn the rocking horse. Mark dragged it outside, drenched it in gasoline, and lit the match. The flames engulfed the toy quickly, and Julia felt a brief wave of relief as it cracked and blackened. That night, Lila screamed so loudly the neighbors heard. They rushed to her room and found her curled in the corner, eyes wide, lips trembling. "He's angry now," she whispered. "He said that was his favorite." Then her bedroom window shattered inward. Glass flew like shrapnel across the room. No rocks, no hail, no storm. Just a blast of icy air and a presence that made Julia's skin crawl. They left the house the next day, staying at a motel while deciding their next move. Lila wouldn't speak. She just stared at her hands as if waiting for them to move without her permission. Mark suggested seeing a child psychologist. But then the house called, literally. Julia's phone buzzed with a call from their landline. It was impossible. No one was there. She answered. Static. And beneath the static, a voice faint, childlike. "Come back. I'm not done playing." Click. They contacted a paranormal investigator. He came with equipment, EMF meters, thermal cameras, voice recorders. Julia and Mark watched from outside as he climbed into the attic. 30 minutes passed. Then the attic window lit up. The investigator stumbled out of the house, face pale, hands trembling. "There's something in that attic," he said, something that was never human. He played back a recording. Amid the crackling static was a voice, raspy, distorted. "She's mine now. You left her. That means she's mine." Julia and Mark ran to the motel. Lila was gone. The manager claimed she had walked out alone, smiling, barefoot. Security footage showed her stepping into the woods behind the building. They searched for days. Volunteers combed the forests. Nothing. Weeks turned into months. The case went cold. Julia and Mark split up under the weight of grief and guilt. She moved to another state. Mark, broken and hollow, stayed behind, haunted by the memory of Lila's last smile. A year later, a new family bought the farmhouse. Their 6-year-old son was ecstatic to explore the big attic. "Do you like it up here?" his mother asked, watching him sit on the floor, staring into the shadows. He nodded slowly. "There's a girl here," he said. "She doesn't talk much, but she plays with me." The mother smiled. "What's her name?" He turned to her, face blank. "Leela, but she says she has a new name now." "What's that?" He looked toward the darkest corner of the attic. "Mother." They say when someone dies suddenly, especially in a place not meant for death, a part of them stays behind, trapped, confused, angry. That's what the townsfolk of Red Hollow whispered about the Hartley Public Library. A grand old building of red brick and towering arched windows built in the late 1800s, it was beautiful from the outside. But inside the air was always just a little too cold, and the silence never felt peaceful. It felt watched. Emily had never believed in ghost stories. A recent graduate with a degree in library sciences, she saw the position at Red Hollow as a temporary gig, resume filler until she could land a real job in the city. She laughed at the rumors, even when the head librarian handed her a small iron bell on her first day. "In case you ever hear footsteps on the 3rd floor," the woman said, not meeting Emily's eyes. "Just ring this. Once." Emily assumed it was just town superstition. But she still kept the bell in her pocket. Her duties were simple. Catalog returned books, restock shelves, and lock up each night. The only real rule was never to use the 3rd floor reading room after dark. Historic preservation, the staff said. Weak floorboards. But even during the day, that room felt off. No windows, just one long table in the center, surrounded by mismatched chairs. And in the far corner, an old portrait of a stern-faced woman in a black dress. No nameplate, no artist's signature. Just those pale, angry eyes that followed you no matter where you stood. On her 3rd week, Emily worked late, reorganizing the archives in the basement after a minor flood. By the time she returned upstairs, the sun had dipped behind the trees and the library lights buzzed overhead like insects. She gathered her things, did her final sweep, and was just locking the front door when she heard it. Footsteps. Above her. Heavy. Deliberate. Crossing the third floor. She froze. Everyone had left. She was sure of it. "Hello?" she called out, heart already racing. Silence. She waited, holding her breath. Then, another step, then two more. Crossing directly above her head, she pulled out her phone, dialing the head librarian. No signal. With trembling fingers, she reached into her coat pocket and took out the bell. She stared at it. This was ridiculous. But when the footsteps began again, faster this time, circling above her, she rang it. The sound echoed, sharp and unnatural in the silent library. Everything stopped. No footsteps, no creaks, nothing. She stood frozen, ears straining. Then behind her she heard a slow creak, a door opening. She turned toward the staircase. The third floor door, which had been locked for years, was open. Dim yellow light spilled out from within. Emily should have left. She should have run. But curiosity, or something darker, pulled her toward the stairs. She climbed slowly, each step screaming under her weight. At the top, she paused, gripping the railing. The reading room looked different. Clean, polished. The portrait was gone, and the table, now set for tea. Porcelain cups, silver spoons, fresh scones on delicate plates, and in one of the chairs, facing away from her, sat a figure in a black dress. Emily tried to speak, but her voice caught. "Come sit," the figure said, her voice like ice on bare skin. Emily's legs moved without permission. She sat. The woman turned slowly, the same face from the portrait. Pale, hollow-eyed, unblinking. "You rang the bell," she said. "That means you're staying." Emily tried to stand. Her body didn't respond. "I've been so very lonely," the woman continued. "They all leave, but not you, not now." Emily's breath came shallow. "Please, let me go." The woman's smile was sharp. "You came willingly. That means I can keep your voice." She reached across the table and placed her cold hand over Emily's throat. A burning sensation crawled up her neck. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Then, darkness. When Emily woke, she was lying on the floor of the reading room. Everything was dusty again. The portrait was back on the wall. The tea set was gone. She stumbled downstairs, throat raw, and tried to scream. Nothing. Her voice was gone. She drove home in silence, trembling. Doctors couldn't explain it. Psychological trauma, they guessed. Stress-induced aphonia. She tried to write down what happened, but every time she attempted it, the words faded on the page. Eventually, she stopped trying. She moved back to the city, started over, found work managing a digital archive. Silent, withdrawn, but alive. Years passed. Then one day, a young man came to her desk, a reporter, investigating the Hartley Library's history. "Strangest thing," he said. "All records of the original reading room staff from the 1900s? Gone, except one. A woman named Emily Carter vanished in 2023. Says she was last seen entering the third floor." Emily froze. That wasn't her last name. Not yet. The photo he placed on her desk showed her face, older, worn, lifeless, framed on the wall of the reading room. She hadn't escaped. She had replaced her. And somewhere back in that cursed library, someone new was about to ring the bell. Everyone in the city had a story about apartment 313 in the Bellevue Tower. Some claimed it was cursed. Others swore it never existed at all. The strange part? No two people remembered the same thing about it. Different layouts, different furniture, even different windows. But one detail always stayed the same. No one who entered apartment 313 ever came out the same. Some didn't come out at all. Maya was a junior crime journalist, desperate for a breakout story. When she stumbled upon a thread on an obscure online forum filled with first-person accounts of terrifying experiences tied to 313, she thought she'd found her chance. Missing persons, urban legends, paranormal reports, all in the same location. She rented apartment 312, the unit right next door. The first night was quiet, too quiet. No footsteps, no voices, no creaks from the unit next door. She knocked on the wall. No reply. She left a glass on the floor, pressed to the wall, listening. Nothing. But at exactly 3:13 a.m., she heard the knock. 3 slow taps. Deliberate. From inside apartment 3113. She stared at the wall, heart pounding. Another knock. She grabbed her recorder and whispered, "Are you real?" Silence. Then something dragged across the floor, like a chair scraping wood. Maya barely slept. The next day, she asked the landlord about the unit. "There is no 313, he said, not looking up from his clipboard. She pointed to the door. "It's right there." "No, it's not," he said and walked away. That night, the knocking came again. This time, it didn't stop. At 3:17 a.m., the door to apartment 313 creaked open. She stared at it from her peephole. No one came out. No one went in. The door just hung there, open. She stepped out, phone flashlight in hand, and approached the door. Inside was darkness, and something colder than the hallway air. Her breath fogged instantly. "Maya," a voice whispered from inside. She froze. No one knew she was staying there. No one. The voice came again, from deeper in the room. "Help me." She should have run, but her instincts kicked in. This could be the story. She stepped in. The door slammed shut behind her. She turned, no knob on the inside, just a flat, featureless wall. The room was wrong. Too long. The ceiling too high. It felt stretched, distorted. The windows showed nothing but black fog. No city skyline. No lights. As she stepped forward, the walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting like lungs. She saw a figure in the corner. It was a man, or what had once been a man. Emaciated, pale, eyes sunken, skin stretched over sharp bone. He stared at her with a look of absolute despair. "Don't talk to it," he whispered. "What?" "The apartment. Don't answer it. Don't believe it. Don't speak your name again. If you do, it knows you." Suddenly, the room began to change. The wallpaper peeled back in long, wet strips. The carpet writhed with movement, hundreds of thin, finger-like things burrowing beneath it. Maya stumbled backward, screaming. The man screamed too, but not at her. He pointed to the ceiling. Something was descending. Not a creature, the room itself. The ceiling bent like melted plastic, folding down to meet her. A mouth opened, no lips, just a jagged split with hundreds of human teeth, right above her head. "Say your name," the voice commanded. She clamped her mouth shut. The man began sobbing. "You'll never leave unless you do," he whispered. "Don't lie to her," said a second voice. It came from the floor this time. The carpet split, revealing an eye. Huge, bloodshot, blinking slowly. "Say it," the voice repeated. "Say your name, and you can go home." Maya trembled. "Maya," she whispered before she could stop herself. The eye rolled back, the ceiling mouth smiled, and the world split. The next thing she knew, she was standing outside apartment 313 again. Door shut. Locked. Everything normal. She checked her phone. It was morning, April 4th, except it had been April 1st when she went inside. 3 days had passed. She rushed downstairs and confronted the landlord. "What happened to apartment 313? I was in there." The landlord blinked. "Apartment 313 burned down in 1998. Gas explosion. No one's been inside since." He walked away. Maya rushed back up to 312, heart pounding. She grabbed her laptop and camera. All her recordings were gone. Her notebook was blank. No audio, no video, nothing but a sticky note on her desk, in her own handwriting. "Don't tell anyone. Ever." She stared at it for a long time. But of course, she did tell someone. Her editor. She told him everything. The next morning, her editor was found dead in his apartment. Mouth torn open, eyes missing. And taped to his chest, a single sticky note. She told. Terrified, Maya packed her things, left the city, changed her number. But it didn't matter. The knocking followed her. No matter where she went, always at 3:13 a.m. And sometimes when she blinked too long or turned too fast, she'd see it. Her old apartment door, standing open, waiting. When Malik transferred to the remote village of Kora as part of a field research assignment for his anthropology degree, he wasn't thrilled. It was the kind of place you couldn't find on most maps. One unpaved road in, dense forest all around, and barely any signal. The villagers were quiet, suspicious of outsiders, and unnervingly traditional. He'd only planned to stay for a week, document a few rituals, maybe interview the elders about folklore. But something about Kora felt stuck in time. Not quaint, not peaceful, just wrong. His first few nights were uneventful, though he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The old guest house they gave him had no mirrors, no locks on the doors, and a distinct smell of damp earth. Every morning he'd find dirt on the floor near his bed. Just a handful. Always fresh. He asked about it. The old caretaker, Bibi Zarina, gave a dismissive laugh and said, "The soil here never rests. It moves where it wants." He assumed it was just superstition. Or rats. Then he heard the chanting. It was the fourth night. Somewhere between midnight and 1, a low, guttural rhythm echoed through the trees. Not loud, just persistent, like dozens of people whispering the same phrase again and again in a language he didn't understand. When he looked out the window, he saw them. Figures, cloaked in black, walking slowly through the forest, toward the center of the village. He grabbed his recorder, threw on a jacket, and followed at a distance. They formed a circle in front of a giant tree behind the village. A tree with bark so black it looked charred, and roots that seemed to twitch when touched by moonlight. In the center of the circle was a child, maybe 8 years old, eyes closed, hands tied. No one noticed him. The chanting grew louder, and then silence. One of the cloaked figures stepped forward with a knife carved from bone. Malik stumbled backward in shock, snapping a branch beneath his feet. Every hooded head turned. He ran. Branches lashed at his face. He didn't stop until he was back at the guest house, heart hammering, lungs burning. He locked the door with a chair, though it felt useless. Sleep was impossible. The next morning, the village was calm. Children played, women cooked, men repaired fishing nets. The tree didn't exist anymore, not even a stump. When Malik asked about it, the villagers acted confused. What tree? What chanting? Even Bibi Zarina just smiled and offered him tea. He decided to leave early. That night, he packed his things. But when he tried to leave, his motorbike was gone. No one had seen it. He walked to the only road out and found it blocked by trees that hadn't been there before. Not fallen trees, standing, growing, like the forest had rearranged itself. That night, the dirt pile by his bed was larger, and something else had been added. A finger bone. Polished. Clean. He didn't sleep. He watched the door until morning. He tried the radio. No signal. The power went out just after sunset. He lit a candle and sat in the corner with a knife. Then came the knock. Soft, deliberate, right on the wood of his door. He held his breath. Another knock, and a voice. A child's voice. Help me. The same child from the ritual. He opened the door. Yet no one was there. But muddy footprints led away from the door. Small, bare feet heading toward the woods. He followed, lantern in hand, adrenaline replacing fear. The footprints stopped at the black tree. Somehow it was back. Larger than before. Its bark pulsing like veins, its roots stretching toward him. The child stood by the trunk, staring at him. "I didn't want to," she whispered. "They made me." "Who?" Malik asked, his voice shaking. She pointed upward. Dozens of cloaked figures stood in the trees, limbs twisted in impossible ways, faces hidden, watching. "She didn't scream," said a voice behind him. He turned. Bibi Zarina stood there, her eyes entirely white. None of them scream anymore. Before he could run, the roots snared his ankles, dragging him toward the base of the tree. "We feed it," she said. "It keeps us alive." He screamed as bark peeled open like lips, revealing rows of splintered wooden teeth. Darkness swallowed him whole. Weeks later, a new traveler arrived in Kora, an eager journalist chasing ghost stories and missing persons. He asked about Malik. The villagers said no one by that name had come. He asked about the black tree. The villagers smiled and said there were no such trees here. But the guest house stood open, and inside the journalist found a clean room with freshly made sheets and a single polished bone placed gently on the pillow. When he turned to ask the caretaker about it, Bibi Zarina just smiled. "Welcome," she said. "You must be tired. Rest now. The soil will keep you safe." The town of Bramblewood hadn't had a proper storm in over a year, until the night the cemetery split open. It started with the thunder, long, groaning rumbles that echoed like growls beneath the earth. Rain followed fast, slicing through the air in sheets. Most people stayed inside, windows shuttered, lights dimmed. But not everyone. Dennis Lyle, the town's gravedigger for nearly 40 years, was out at Hollow Pine Cemetery with a lantern and a bottle of whiskey. He was checking the perimeter, as he did every Friday. He didn't believe in ghosts. He didn't even believe in God. But he believed in the dead staying buried, and tonight, something was trying to change that. At 12:17 a.m., the first coffin clawed its way to the surface. Dennis saw the ground heave like breath, saw the soil tremble and crack, then split wide. From the grave of Emmett Charters, a man who died in 1963, came the sound of scraping wood and muffled banging. Dennis dropped his lantern, and then the fingers appeared. Rotting, discolored fingers clawing out of the soil. Nails cracked and blackened. They gripped the edges of the grave, and slowly Emmett's head emerged. Hollow eye sockets, mouth open in a scream that made no sound. Dennis ran. He didn't stop until he got back to his truck. He left the cemetery gates swinging in the wind. By morning, no one believed his story, not until the photos showed up. Someone, no one knows who, slipped a manila envelope under the sheriff's office door. Inside were 10 black and white photos of the cemetery, half a dozen graves torn open, coffins split like dry wood, and something crawling out of one of them. The town went into a quiet panic. Hollow Pines was sealed off. The church held emergency prayer sessions. And Dennis disappeared 3 days later. His truck was found abandoned near the cemetery. The driver's seat was soaked in blood. That's when the dream started. Dozens of Bramblewood residents reported the same dream. Standing in the cemetery at night, rain falling around them, thunder growling. They'd see open graves. Sometimes they'd see themselves in one, alive, screaming, being buried by shadowy figures. Always the same figures, tall, thin, with stitched mouths and no eyes. One man, Marcus Bell, woke up screaming and gouged out his own eyes with a fork before paramedics arrived. He survived, but never spoke again. The town tried to move on. The graves were resealed. The church held a blessing ceremony. A new gravedigger, Carla, was hired, young, skeptical, and determined not to fall for small-town hysteria. Her first week was quiet, until she saw the girl. It was just after dusk, and Carla was doing a final check near the north edge of the cemetery, where the oldest graves were, some dating back to the 1800s. That's where she spotted the little girl standing near a tombstone. White dress, no shoes, head tilted. Carla called out to her. The girl looked up, and her eyes, black pits with no whites, no pupils, locked onto hers. Then she opened her mouth, so wide, wider than humanly possible, and screamed. But no sound came out. Carla stumbled backward, dropped her flashlight, and when she looked back up, the girl was gone. That night, Carla dreamed of standing in an open grave, soil raining down on her as stitched-faced figures whispered in a language she didn't know. When she woke up, dirt was under her fingernails and in her hair. She quit the next day. The town started losing people after that. One by one. Not murdered, not kidnapped, just gone. Their houses were left unlocked, food still cooking on the stove, pets unfed. Over 24 people in 2 months. No answers, just rumors. Some said the dead were angry, that the storm had opened something buried long before Hollow Pines was ever a cemetery, a place once used for ritual burials, sacrifices. Some claimed to hear chanting in the woods beyond the graveyard, voices in a dead language carried on the wind. Others said the graves weren't just letting things out, they were pulling people in. Sheriff Dalton, a hardened man with no patience for myths, finally snapped after losing his son, Timmy, who vanished after walking his dog near the cemetery fence. The sheriff went to the cemetery at sunset with a shotgun and gasoline. He poured fuel over the graves, muttering to himself, screaming at shadows. He set the place on fire, or tried to. The fire wouldn't catch, not even with dry leaves and kerosene. The wind howled louder. The ground shook, and the graves, dozens of them, began opening all at once. That's when the sheriff's radio crackled. Through the static came a child's voice. "Daddy, I'm cold." It was Timmy, sobbing, begging for help. The sheriff fell to his knees, dropped the shotgun, and walked toward the nearest open grave. He never came back out. The town of Bramblewood is mostly abandoned now, a ghost town in every sense. The cemetery is overgrown, choked by ivy and mist. No one dares go near it. But if you drive past on a stormy night, you might hear the thunder rumble. You might see figures moving between the tombstones. And if you listen closely, very closely, you might hear your name being whispered from beneath the soil. It started with a missing dog. Old Man Harrow lived 3 houses down from Emily and her parents. He was one of those shut-in types, grumpy, quiet, eyes always watching from behind dusty curtains. People said he'd once been a butcher, but no one really knew. What they did know was that he lived alone, never had guests, and never smiled. When Emily's golden retriever Max vanished one rainy Thursday evening, she knew something was wrong. Max never ran off. He was old, slow, and loyal. Always came back when called. But that night, he didn't return from the yard. They searched the neighborhood with flashlights, calling his name until their voices were hoarse. Nothing. Just the sound of wet leaves crunching under their boots and the hiss of wind through the trees. Emily swore she heard barking at one point, faint, like it was coming from underground, but her parents brushed it off as her imagination. The next day, she noticed something odd. A smear of red on Harrow's back porch. It looked like blood. Fresh. Like someone had tried to clean it, but gave up halfway. She told her dad, who just sighed and said Harrow probably cut himself or something. "Don't go near his house," he warned. "The man's not right in the head." But Emily couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, she snuck out. She waited until her parents were asleep, slipped on her hoodie, and took Max's old leash with her. Just in case. Rain had started to fall again, soft at first, then heavier, soaking through her shoes as she made her way to Harrow's property. His house loomed in the dark like something forgotten by time. The yard was overgrown, bushes twisted like gnarled hands. Windows glared like hollow eyes. Emily's heart pounded so hard she was sure he'd hear it. But the house was silent. She crept around to the backyard, where she'd seen the blood. The porch creaked under her weight, but no lights turned on. She crouched, inspecting the dark stain. It was still wet. That's when she heard it. A low, whimpering sound, like a dog, muffled, coming from beneath the porch. There was a small hatch partially hidden by dead leaves, rusted shut at the edges but with a handle. Emily hesitated, then pulled. It groaned open, revealing a narrow, dirt tunnel descending into darkness. The smell hit her first. Rot. Copper. Old meat. She gagged but climbed down, using her phone's flashlight to guide the way. The tunnel was tight, damp walls pressing in. The barking grew louder, frantic now. And then she found the door. A thick metal slab embedded into the earth. The kind you see in slaughterhouses. It had a sliding peephole smeared with something she didn't want to identify. Emily tried the handle. It opened. What lay beyond wasn't a basement. It was a butcher's chamber. Chains hung from the ceiling. Hooks. A large wooden table stained black with age and use. Shelves lined with jars, some containing animal parts. Others weren't so easy to identify. Max was there, caged in the corner, whimpering, fur matted with blood that didn't seem to be his. Emily rushed to him, sobbing with relief, fumbling with the cage lock. But as she struggled, something behind her clicked. The door had closed, and she wasn't alone. Old man Harrow stepped from the shadows. He wasn't surprised to see her. In fact, he looked almost pleased. "I was wondering how long it would take someone to come looking." His voice was calm. Too calm, like he was discussing the weather. Emily backed away, clutching Max. Her flashlight shook in her hand, the beam trembling across the room. Harrow smiled, revealing yellowed teeth and a glint of metal behind his lower lip. Something embedded there. A hook? "Used to be just the dogs," he continued. "Then the cats. But they weren't enough. Not anymore. You'd be amazed how fast it escalates. What you start doing out of curiosity becomes habit." Emily screamed. She grabbed the nearest object, a glass jar, and hurled it at him. It shattered, slicing across his cheek. He staggered but didn't fall. She snatched a rusty bone saw from the table and swung. This time, he fell. She didn't wait to see if he'd stay down. She unlocked Max's cage and ran, dragging him behind her through the tunnel. Up the hatch. Into the rain. When she burst into her house, she was covered in mud and blood, shaking so hard she could barely speak. Her parents called the cops. They didn't believe her at first, not until they found the tunnel. Not until they found what Harrow had buried in his backyard. Bones. Dozens of them. Some animal, some not. He was arrested, but something was off. He didn't resist, just smiled as they cuffed him, whistled an old nursery rhyme the entire ride to the station, and that night, Max went missing again. The doors were locked, windows shut, but he was gone. Emily checked the yard, the street, even the woods. She found him the next morning, hanging from a tree, eyes wide, mouth sewn shut, a note pinned to his collar. "You opened the door, now you can't close it." After that, the dreams started, of chains, of hooks, of cold, blood-slick walls. Every night, the same, and every morning something new was dead in their neighborhood. Birds, squirrels, a neighbor's cat. Then a kid went missing. Then another. People started whispering about curses, about haunted ground. But Emily knew the truth. Old man Harrow was still in jail, but something else had been waiting in that tunnel, something that had used him. And now that the door had been opened again, it didn't need him anymore. The motel sat just off Route 17, far enough from town that most people passed it without a second glance. A faded vacancy sign flickered erratically in the window, like it was struggling to stay alive. The paint on the exterior had long since peeled away, and the smell of mildew hung thick in the air. The kind of place you check into when you're desperate, not when you have choices. Jake didn't have choices. He'd been driving for 13 hours straight, his car filled with boxes, leftover food containers, and the lingering tension of a failed relationship. He wasn't running from anything, or at least that's what he told himself. He just needed distance. A break from the noise of the city. Somewhere quiet to think. The receptionist didn't ask questions. She handed him a rusty key with a plastic tag that read Room 6, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her fingers were long, too long, and her skin had a strange, paper-dry texture that Jake noticed when their hands briefly touched. "Just one night," he muttered. She didn't respond. The hallway was dim, the carpet soaked in years of grime. The door to Room 6 stuck before it gave way with a loud creak. Inside, the room was as expected. Outdated, stained wallpaper, a sagging mattress, and a TV bolted to the dresser with missing buttons. Jake tossed his bag on the bed and let out a long breath. He told himself he was too tired to care. But even then, something felt wrong. The air was too still, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. And the mirror over the sink had smudges that looked like fingerprints, despite the room supposedly being cleaned. He ignored it, took a quick shower, ate a sandwich, tried watching the TV, but only static played on every channel. That night, he dreamt of knocking. Not from the door, but from inside the walls. A rhythmic, almost polite tapping. He didn't wake up scared. He woke up confused. The room was colder than it had been. His breath fogged slightly in the air, and the clock on the nightstand blinked 3:11 a.m., frozen. He stood up, rubbed his arms, and heard it again. Knock. 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 This time from the closet. It didn't make sense. The closet was small, empty. He'd checked it earlier. But now, the door stood slightly ajar, and the knocking came again, softer, like fingernails brushing against wood. He stepped toward it slowly, every instinct in his body telling him not to. But Jake had always been the kind of person who needed proof, needed to see the monster under the bed before he believed in it. He flung the door open. Empty. He let out a shaky laugh, turned to go back to bed, and stopped cold. There was a figure in the mirror. Not his reflection. Standing behind him, tall, thin, a face half in shadow, half in some grotesque smile that stretched far too wide. Its eyes were sunken holes, and something dripped from its fingertips, black and thick like tar. Jake spun around. Nothing. The room was empty, silent again. But when he looked back at the mirror, it was cracked. A single jagged fracture running down the center. He didn't sleep the rest of the night. By morning, the crack was gone. The receptionist was gone too. Jake banged on the counter, looked around, but no one answered. No cars in the lot except his. No other guests. The air smelled worse now, like something rotting behind the walls. He should have left then. Packed his stuff and driven until the motel was just a speck in the rearview mirror. But he didn't. Something held him there. Curiosity, or maybe something darker. He stayed another night. The knocking began earlier this time. And it wasn't just the closet. It came from the floorboards, from the walls, from the ceiling. Knock, knock, knock. Always 3 times, always slow. And then came the voice. Faint, garbled, like a cassette tape playing underwater. You see it now, don't you? Jake sat frozen on the edge of the bed. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. You let it in. The mirror shattered. No impact, no reason. Just exploded, spider webbing out from the center like something had punched it from the other side. Jake backed away, blood running cold. From the shards, the figure emerged. Not a reflection anymore. It crawled out of the glass slowly as though pulling itself from another world. Its limbs were too long, its joints bending the wrong way. No eyes, just black holes where they should be. Its smile never moved, but its voice echoed in Jake's mind. You were the key. Jake ran. Out of the room, down the hallway, into the lobby, empty. He grabbed his keys and burst into the parking lot. His car wouldn't start. No click, no engine noise, just silence. Behind him, all the motel doors creaked open in unison. Every single one. Figures stood in each doorway, each of them wearing the same grotesque smile. All tall, all faceless, all dripping that same inky substance onto the ground. Jake screamed. He ran into the woods behind the motel, branches tearing at his clothes, his lungs burning with cold night air. He didn't stop until the sun began to rise. When he finally looked back, there was no motel. Just a dirt road. An empty clearing, like it had never been there. Jake tried reporting it. The police found nothing, no building, no foundation, nothing on the maps. They told him he'd had a breakdown. Stress, isolation, too much caffeine, maybe even drugs. But Jake knows what he saw. He knows what followed him. Because now, every night at 3:11 a.m., no matter where he is, the knocking returns, always 3 times. Always from somewhere too close. And in every mirror he passes, he sees a crack starting to form, waiting for him to stop watching, just long enough for it to come through again. It started with a leak, just a slow drip from the attic that left a damp stain on the hallway ceiling. I noticed it while brushing my teeth, staring up at the growing, sprawling brown splotch with sleepy eyes. My landlord was supposed to have the roof redone last summer, but like everything else in this rundown house, it never happened. I went up to check it out. The attic stairs groaned under my weight, and the old wood moaned like it didn't want me up there. The bulb in the ceiling had burned out long ago, so I used my phone's flashlight to scan the dark. At first there was nothing, just the usual forgotten boxes, dusty furniture, cobwebs in every corner. Then I saw the puddle. It was directly beneath a wooden beam in the center of the attic, perfectly still despite the dripping sound. Oddly dark. I leaned in, expecting water, but it wasn't water. It was thick. Black. Like oil or blood, but darker. It didn't shine or reflect light. It just absorbed it. I stepped back, suddenly uneasy. Something about the shape of the puddle wasn't right. It looked almost intentional, as if it had formed a perfect oval, like an eye. That night, the whispers began. I live alone, no roommates, no pets, just me in that creaking old house. But I could hear it, soft voices drifting down from the attic. At first, I thought it was wind, or my imagination, but it kept happening. Same time, around 3:10 a.m., just beneath the edge of hearing, just enough to let you doubt yourself. Until one night, it said my name. I shot up in bed, cold sweat on my back. Silence again. I held my breath. The air felt heavier, like it had weight, like it was pressing down on me. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I went back into the attic. The puddle was still there, but now there were footprints around it. Bare feet. Small, like a child's. But I don't have children. I don't even have friends who visit. I crouched near the edge of the black puddle, my heart hammering in my ears. I reached out and touched it with the tip of a broomstick. The wood hissed. It hissed like meat hitting a hot skillet, and the tip of the broom darkened, permanently stained. I backed away and slammed the attic door shut, heart racing. I told myself I was tired, stressed, hallucinating. Maybe the old house had some weird chemical runoff. That must be it. I tried to forget about it. But the next night, I woke up to something breathing. Not beside me. Above me. I stared at the ceiling, listening. There it was. A slow, labored exhale, like someone who had been crying for hours. Then a shuffle. Then a faint dragging sound. I turned on the lights. Nothing. But I didn't sleep again. The stain on the ceiling got darker. It began to spread. Not dripping anymore. Growing. Like something was seeping through the wood. And the voices became clearer. Children, whispering, laughing, crying, sometimes screaming. I finally called my landlord. He came by in the morning, unconvinced. "You sure it's not raccoons?" he asked, poking at the ceiling. "Or maybe some bad plumbing from the old pipes." "I'm hearing voices," I said, almost embarrassed. He gave me a long, concerned look. "Have you ever had a history of anxiety?" I didn't answer. He said he'd send someone to look at it next week. No one came. That night, something knocked on the attic door. Not from outside, from inside. 3 knocks. Deliberate, heavy, like knuckles on wood. I stared at the ceiling, frozen in bed. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then came the whisper. Not drifting, not faint, loud, clear, right beside my ear. "Don't let them out." I screamed. When I opened the attic door the next day, the puddle was gone. But the footprints had multiplied. There were dozens now, maybe more, small, childlike, moving in circles. Some of them led toward the attic stairs, but none came back. I set up a camera, motion activated, pointed directly at the attic floor. That night I waited. At 3:09 a.m., the light on the camera turned green. Motion detected. At 3:10 a.m., it shut off completely. When I reviewed the footage the next day, all I saw was static. The attic stain returned, but this time it didn't stay on the ceiling. I woke up to find dark streaks running down my bedroom wall, like something had crawled through the drywall and wept ink. That morning, the whispering started before 3 a.m. Now I could hear laughter, giggling, but broken, wrong, like it came from mouths that didn't understand joy. I called in a priest. He didn't make it through the blessing. He stepped into the attic, paused, and immediately walked back out. Pale as a ghost, he refused to speak, just left a bottle of holy water on the table and drove off without saying a word. The next day, I went digging again. I searched through property records, local archives, anything I could find on the house. That's when I found the story. In 1973, this house belonged to a man named Thomas Morwin, a foster parent. He had 12 children living here. All of them disappeared. No bodies were found. No signs of forced entry. The only clue left behind was a single word carved into the attic floor. Watching. The police suspected Morwin, but they never found him. He vanished the same night the children did. Neighbors reported hearing strange sounds, seeing shadows in the windows. But the case went cold. They never mentioned the black puddle, or the voices. But I knew. I felt it. Whatever happened in this house didn't end. It just waited. Last night I tried to seal the attic door. I nailed it shut, placed salt along the cracks, read every protection ritual I could find online. But at exactly 3:10 a.m., the nails popped out, one by one. The door creaked open, and a small, pale hand gripped the edge from the inside. I don't remember what happened after that. I woke up this morning with the attic door wide open. My feet were dirty, covered in dust and something black. There's a child's handprint on my bedroom mirror, and in the corner of the glass, written in condensation, is a message. Now you're the attic. The voices are louder today. They chant in unison. They giggle. They cry, and now they knock. Every hour, every minute, every second. They're not asking to be let out anymore. They're telling me I never left. The rain was heavier than usual that night, clinging to everything like a wet sheet of sorrow. Streetlights flickered through the downpour, casting distorted halos that danced across the puddles and asphalt. I pulled my hoodie tighter over my head, trying to stay warm as I walked home from another double shift at the diner. It was 2:47 a.m. That's when I saw him again. He stood under the broken streetlight at the end of Maple Street, motionless, facing my direction. Same long beige raincoat, same wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his face. He'd been there the night before, and the night before that. I told myself he was probably a homeless man, maybe just someone trying to get out of the rain, but the way he stood, still as a statue, made my skin crawl. I slowed, debating if I should take the long way home, but that meant going through an alleyway that had always made me uneasy. I told myself to grow up. This was a public street. Whoever he was, he hadn't approached me. He hadn't even moved. I picked up my pace and walked past him, refusing to look directly at his face. As I passed, I felt it. The air around him was wrong. Not cold, not warm, just empty. Like the space he occupied didn't belong to this world. No breath came from him, no sound of feet shifting, no scent of wet fabric. Just nothing. A hollow bubble in the world where he stood. I didn't look back. The next night, he was closer. Not at the end of Maple Street anymore. He stood in front of the laundromat 2 blocks from my apartment. Same coat, same hat, same silence. I walked on the other side of the street. The third night, he was right across the road from my building. I didn't sleep. I sat at my window all night, peeking through the blinds, watching his silhouette beneath the rain. He didn't move. Not once. He just stood there, watching. By morning, he was gone. I told myself I was being paranoid. Overworked. Maybe I was hallucinating from lack of sleep. But that same day, I found the note. Slid under my apartment door, typewritten on yellowing paper. I remember you. Do you remember me? My hands trembled as I held the paper. I looked out the peephole, half expecting him to be standing right there. But the hallway was empty. That night, I installed a camera facing the street. The next morning, there were no recordings. Just static. Another note was waiting for me. You forget so easily. But I don't. I began skipping shifts, too afraid to go out after dark. My manager warned me about my job, but I didn't care. I barely ate. I barely spoke. My days were spent staring out the window. The figure didn't come every night anymore. Sometimes there'd be days of nothing. Then suddenly he'd appear again, a little closer, always still, always watching. Then came the knock. It was just past 3 a.m. I sat up in bed, heart thudding. The knock didn't come from the door. It came from the window. I live on the 3rd floor. Slowly I got out of bed and approached the window, each step feeling like it was being taken in someone else's body. I pulled back the curtain. He was there, face pressed against the glass. But now I could see him clearly. His skin was pale, waxy, stretched unnaturally tight across his skull. His mouth was torn at both ends, like someone had slit the corners into a permanent jagged smile. His eyes were hollow, 2 deep pits of shadow with faint pinpricks of red glowing in the center. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe. He mouthed something. I couldn't hear it through the glass, but I knew what it was. "I remember you." I screamed and stumbled backward, tripping over my bed. When I scrambled back to the window, he was gone. Only wet footprints on the fire escape remained, leading nowhere. The next morning, I dug through old boxes in my closet, things from my childhood I hadn't touched in years. I didn't know what I was looking for, just a sense of something familiar, something connected. That's when I found the photo. It was from when I was 10, me standing in front of our old house, holding a sparkler on the 4th of July. And next to me, him. Same coat, same hat, same unnatural smile. The memory hit me like a train. He was the man who used to live next door. Mr. Halberd. He was strange, always gave off this sick feeling, like rotting meat hidden under fresh flowers. My parents told me to stay away from him. Said he'd once gone to prison but didn't say why. One night, I followed my older brother into his backyard. We heard screams coming from the basement. My brother dared me to peek through the basement window. I did. I saw Mr. Halberd cutting something, or someone. We told our parents, they didn't believe us. 3 weeks later, my brother went missing, and Mr. Halberd was gone. The cops never found anything. My family moved away. I forgot, or maybe I forced myself to. Until now. The final note appeared that night. Not under my door, not on the floor, but on my bedroom wall, scrawled in something dark and flaking. "Now you remember." The lights in my room blew out. My phone screen shattered in my hand. A cold breeze swirled around me, though all windows were shut, and from the corner of the room the whisper came again. "Now, it's your turn." I haven't left my apartment since. The windows are covered, the lights stay on when they work. I don't sleep. I can't, because when I do, he comes closer, and he never stops watching.